I'd like to call to order the Committee on House Administration for today's committee hearing. A quorum is present, so we can proceed. And the meeting record will remain open for 5 legislative days so that members might submit any other materials that they might wish to be included in the record. And first of all, we're going to have a quick markup here before we go into our hearing scheduled today on the National Zoo. Our markup, we will consider one item, which is H.R. 863, which is a bill to establish a commission to study the potential creation of a National Women's History Museum. The Committee on Natural Resources actually has primary jurisdiction over this bill, over this issue. House Administration has jurisdiction over the single issue of the bill of having the commission consider whether the museum should be part of the Smithsonian Institution. We will be issuing a report on that issue to move the bill forward in the process. But again, on other matters, such as the museum's location, the makeup of the commission, et cetera, they will be addressed by the Committee on Natural Resources. At the end of last year, this committee held a hearing on the topic of the bill that's before us today, and we received testimony from our colleagues and the bill's sponsor in the House, excuse me, Representative Marsha Blackburn and Representative Carolyn Maloney. Their testimony urged Congress to establish a National Women's Museum paid for and maintained entirely with private funds. This bipartisan measure was co-sponsored by more than 85 members. It's an appropriate step to study the possibility of a future Women's History Museum. The accomplishments of women are woven throughout the tapestry of our great nation's history, within small towns or large cities, within each state, and across the entire nation. Women have contributed in every war effort, been inventors, been architects, business innovators, and leaders in shaping Americans' politics as well. Creating a commission to study this endeavor would be an important step toward memorializing America's memory of the deep and enduring contributions women have made. Since the 105th Congress, various bills have been introduced to advance the creation of a women's museum. One bill even passed the House and 2 in the Senate. And today, I hope our committee's action will enable this measure to move forward during this Congress. Establishing a commission is a step in the right direction to fully explore how such a museum would integrate with our existing national institutions, especially the Smithsonian, as well as regional and local cultural institutions, what it will cost, how we can fund it, and where would we put it. These issues, and I'm sure many more, are some areas that a commission will discuss, investigate, and make recommendations for consideration. And I'm sure that we can all agree that the intellectual, cultural, economic, and countless other contributions by half of our society deserve to have the right custodians for today and tomorrow's generation of women to learn about the accomplishments of yesterday's generations. And with this goal in mind, we are considering this bill to establish a commission to study the potential creation of a National Women's History Museum. Again, this bill is also under the jurisdiction of the House Committee on Natural Resources. And it's also important to note that there has been talk that this bill hopefully will receive floor consideration this year. So I'm pleased to have the committee's members support to consider moving this bill forward and to provide an opportunity to determine how our nation can best represent the significant milestones and advancement of our foremothers. I would now recognize my colleague, my ranking member on the committee, Mr. Brady, for the purpose of his opening statement.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Madam Chairman, I join with you in supporting of bipartisan legislation providing for a commission to study the creation of a National Women's History Museum in Washington, D.C. Women comprise more than half the United States population. They have achieved historic accomplishments in all fields of endeavor and deserve this opportunity for recognition in the nation's capital. I anticipate this action on the legislation will be followed later this spring by a hearing on the final report of the American Latino Museum Commission, which has been before us since 2011, and which you expressed an interest at the end of this year. I would urge the members, prior to final action on this bill by the House, to work to expand the size of the Women's History Museum Commission to a more workable number beyond the current 8, and to include presidential appointees, as was the case of the African American Museum and the American Latino Museum Commissions. This would enhance the Commission's chances of ultimate success. Look forward to the opportunity to evaluate the Commission's work during the 114th Congress, and I urge and I vote for this legislation.
Thank you, gentlemen, very much. Are there other members of the committee that would like to have an opening statement? Gentleman, Georgia, Mr. Gingrey, Dr. Gingrey.
Madam Chairman, I want to thank you for calling this markup on H.R. 863. The Commission to study the potential creation of a National Women's History Museum Act. If enacted, this legislation would establish a commission which would then be required to submit a report to the President and to Congress detailing their recommendations for the establishment of a National Women's History Museum located here in Washington, D.C. The bill will also direct the Commission to report on whether the Women's History Museum should be part of the Smithsonian Institution, which is why this committee has the opportunity to weigh in on the legislation before us today. While some museums devoted to women's history already exist, most cover only specific aspects of women's contributions, such as the National Museum of Women in the Arts or the Women of the West Museum. Rather than trying to pick and choose places to add women's history in existing exhibits, a National Women's History Museum will provide a chance to give a more comprehensive account of women's numerous contributions to our nation's history. Women make up more than half of this country's population, yet too often their achievements and their contributions throughout history have been overshadowed. It's past time that we focus on the important influence women have had in their own right, and this bill before us today creates a commission that is a critical first step in so doing. Today's markup gives us, as a committee, an important chance to show our commitment to ensuring that women's history is honored and given the attention that it deserves. Madam Chairman, I thank you, and I yield back.
Thank the gentleman. Are there any other members that wish to make an opening statement? Gentlelady from California.
Just briefly, I wanted to compliment the supporters, actually, in the private sector who helped bring us to this day. It was just a short period of time ago that you and I sat here and we had the authors here, but we also had the people who worked so hard out in the community to get support and to give us hope that we'll be able to actually see this as a museum. So I think this is a very important day. It's obviously, it's just a first step, but it's an important first step, and I know that they are still committed to continuing their efforts. We're going to count on them. I see them here in the audience, and I wanted to note that. And thank you, Madam Chair. I agree with the ranking member. I hope that this can be a model for us and that we'll be able to take similar swift action on the Latino Museum, which has actually been under consideration for a considerable period of time. So if we had a hearing on that, maybe we'd have the same outcome on that. And I, with those comments, would yield back on this great day.
Thank you very much. As I did mention, I'm interested in pursuing a hearing on the Latino Museum, and we'll certainly we'll go through these one at a time here. And but in regards to your comments, Ms. Lofgren, as well, I certainly want to add, and I see some of the ladies out in the audience today that have been so passionate and so dedicated and committed to pushing this forward. So we want to thank you for that, and I know you're going to all continue with that as we take this, as has been mentioned, very important first step. I now call up and lay before the committee H.R. 863, and without objection, the first reading of the bill is dispensed with, and the bill is considered read and open for amendment at any point. Is there any debate? Are there any members that want to offer an amendment on the bill? If not, I would move that the committee favorably report H.R. 863. The question is on the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. Motion carried. In the opinion of the chair, as I say, the ayes have it. So without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid upon the table. Does any member wish to file supplemental, minority, or additional views for inclusion in the committee report to the House?
Madam Chair,
Mr. Brady.
I'd like to announce that the Democratic members will request the 2 additional calendar days provided by Clause 2L of Rule 11 of the Rules of the House in order to file views.
Pursuant to Clause 2 of Rule 11, the member is entitled to 2 additional calendar days to file such views in writing and signed by that member with the clerk of the committee. I would now ask unanimous consent that the staff be authorized to make technical and conforming changes to the measure the committee just considered. Without objection, so ordered. That concludes today's markup. Congratulations, ladies, and we look forward to working with you very much. This portion of our meeting, the markup, is adjourned. I now call to order the Committee on House Administration's hearing regarding the Smithsonian National Zoological Park. The hearing record will remain open for 5 legislative days so that members might submit any materials that they wish to be included therein. And a quorum is present so that we will proceed. This hearing is for the committee to receive an update on the current health and management of the National Zoo, as well as to discuss the important science and research activities regarding endangered species and the National Zoo's overall contribution to the world's conservation efforts. I certainly want to thank the panel of witnesses that we have here for taking time to appear before the committee today. Each of our witnesses has dedicated years to the pursuit of science, conservation, and the passion to share knowledge of the world's species with others around the world. The Smithsonian, based in our capital, is the largest museum and research complex in the world. It includes 19 exceptional museums and galleries, as well as numerous scientific research centers. And today we will be examining one of the most popular Smithsonian facilities, the National Zoo, which is home to one of our nation's and the world's most unique and fascinating living collections. The zoo was created actually by legislation signed into law by President Cleveland on March 2nd of 1889, and so it has a unique role as a federal zoo supported by the taxpayers. It is a zoo truly provided for and by the people. Within its unique role as a federal zoo, the National Zoo receives the majority of its funding from federal appropriations. This funding is one of the many ways our nation exercises our commitment to stewardship and to pursuit of knowledge. It is the Congress's role to ensure the taxpayers' dollars are allocated responsibly, and that the commitment to stewardship behind those dollars is being met. This role has become increasingly important as the zoo works to manage its resources to maintain the health and the safety and overall welfare of the animals in the zoo's care, as well as visitors, employees, and their volunteers. Actually, last week I have a monthly cable show, and I had as my guest Dr. Murray, who is the chief veterinarian for the zoo, who I told her she had the coolest job, I thought, in the entire capital here. But it was very interesting talking to her about the care of all of these animals. And she mentioned that the National Zoo is actually working with the Detroit Zoo, which I am so very proud of, working with, there's a technique that they're using to monitor the heart rate and the rhythm in gorillas, and that some of the information you're learning there actually has transference to humans. And so it was very, very interesting. I look forward certainly to hearing from the director of the National Zoo on how his team has pulled together and met the challenges of being a world-class zoo. It's clear to anyone who visits that the animals at the zoo are incredibly well cared for. And while there has been some recent news stories regarding animal deaths, the deaths, first of all, are most often of natural causes, and many animals are exceeding their normal lifespans. Zoology, like all things, is never perfect. Sometimes an unfortunate incident happens, and the zoo, I believe, has demonstrated their ability to respond and to identify problems and to implement improvements. Overall, the National Zoo has been successful in maintaining the health of the animals in their care at the very highest of levels, as demonstrated by their repeated accreditation by the Association of Zoos and Aquariums. This accreditation reflects the high standards of animal care set by the zoo and its staff. For the last 125 years, the National Zoo has improved its facilities, the living collection, and its participation in the worldwide scientific community focused on advanced species savings research. The National Zoo encompasses a 163-acre zoo park, as well as the Smithsonian Conservation Biology Institute campus on Front Royal, in Virginia, which maintains a research-based collection on 3,200 acres. The National Zoo's mission is to provide engaging experience with animals and to create and share knowledge that save wildlife and habitats, and its vision to save species from extinction. Through a coordinated effort, both the National Zoo Park and the Front Royal campus care for approximately 2,000 animals, representing over 400 species, of which 50 are threatened or endangered. The National Zoo is a national treasure, providing a unique experience, allowing visitors the opportunity to roam and to see animals from all different regions of the world and discover all sorts of species that inhabit our oceans, our lakes, our trees, and our sky. The National Zoo sees up to 2 million visitors annually who have access free of charge. I think that's an important thing to note. Again, free of charge. And the zoo works to engage the local, national, and international communities by preserving wildlife and teaching the responsibility we all share for its conservation. The Smithsonian Conservation Biology Institute campus in Front Royal, Virginia has an equally, if not more important role, The Front Royal campus is home to various endangered species and is a nexus as well for the Smithsonian's global efforts to conserve species as well as to train current and future generations of conservationists. So today we look forward to receiving an update from the leaders of the National Zoo and its primary research arm, the Smithsonian Conservation Biology Institute, and discuss with them how federal funding is being used, the zoo's operations and plans for the future, as well as hear from the directors on the important and noteworthy conservation research and science activities undertaken by the zoo. And we will also hear from the president and CEO of the Association of Zoos and Aquariums, a group which has established high professional standards to review a multitude of areas beyond the quality of animal care, conservation, and research, such as viability of the zoo's governing authority, physical facilities, safety, staffing, and guest services. Zoos make the journey to learn about various species accessible and offer us the opportunity to see an animal firsthand. They also provide the chance for us to encounter an animal that we never knew even existed. Zoos offer us all the knowledge to learn about the world around us and to be caretakers for what is entrusted to us, and that is something I believe that is beyond value. So again, this committee is looking forward to hearing from our three witnesses, and at this time, I would like to turn to the ranking member for his opening statement. Mr. Brady.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for scheduling today's hearing on the Smithsonian National Zoological Park. The visiting season in Washington has already begun, and this means more visitors to the zoo's outstanding facilities on Connecticut Avenue. And while the public does not see it directly, the Smithsonian Conservative Biological Institute, a part of the zoo's complex located in Fort Royal, Virginia, continues its groundbreaking research and educational activities on conservation and the preservation of endangered species. On this committee, we're always concerned about the safety of visitors, the staff at the zoo, and the safety and care of the animals in the collection, and the level of federal funding to support that. We have been assured that federal cuts imposed by the sequestration and other legislation would not impact care of the animals, and I look forward to hearing our witness today to address that important issue. We have periodically approved construction projects to meet the zoo's challenging needs, and we have regularly reminded the Smithsonian Board of Regents of the necessity of keeping admission to Smithsonian facilities, including the zoo, free to the American people, and I remain strongly committed to that priority. I welcome today's witnesses and look forward to your testimony.
Thank the gentleman. Are there any other members that wish to provide an opening statement? Yes, gentleman from California is recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. My comment, and I'd like to hear from you during your testimony if possible, or I'll ask you a question later, is I think you're doing a great job, and we have the San Diego Zoo. We're very proud of it. We think it's the best zoo in the world, but I'm sure others would argue about that. And we've been members forever. And that's why I was so scandalized when the Copenhagen Zoo killed Marius, a healthy giraffe, and then fed it to the lions. And then later on killed 4 other lions. And I think that was outrageous. I would like to know, though, from you if it was something that was necessary. One, and secondly, why didn't we help if we could? Some zoo in the United States, they said that no one would take them. And I'd like to hear a little bit about that. I think it's captured our imagination in a very negative way. And again, I thank you for the opportunity to speak. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank the gentleman very much. Any other members have an opening statement? If not, before I formally introduce our witnesses and begin, I'm going to take a moment of personal privilege here, because I'm like everybody else. I'm addicted to this Panda webcam looking at Bao Bao, and who just yesterday ventured outside of her mother's yard for the first time, and I asked my staff to get the video clip of that. We'll see if it works. Look at that. Unbelievable. Well, there she is. Well, all right. We don't want to go on too long with this clip, but you like the clip? All right, great. Go. I just, you know, I read that on the airplane coming here yesterday, and I said, oh my gosh, we're going to have this hearing tomorrow. We got to see the clip of Bao Bao going outside. Okay. At any rate, that gives you a sense of some of the wonderful, wonderful things they're doing at the zoo. Let me formally introduce our witnesses now. And first of all, Dennis Kelly, of course, is the director of the Smithsonian's National Zoo. He's responsible for overseeing the 163-acre facility in the Rock Creek Park, as well as the 3,200-acre Smithsonian Conservation Biology Institute campus in Front Royal, Virginia. He's also responsible for managing the zoo's research programs and overseas education programs coordinated by the zoo's nonprofit membership organization, Friends of the National Zoo. And in 2011, he was elected to the Association of Zoos and Aquariums Board of Directors. Then we'll hear from Dr. Stephen Montfort, who was appointed as the director of the Smithsonian Conservation Biology Institute in January 2010. The facility, headquartered in Front Royal, Virginia, serves as the focal point for the Smithsonian's effort to use science-based approaches to conserve species and train future generations of conservationists around the world. He has spent his entire career working within the zoological community and has been with the Smithsonian since 1986, serving in many roles including veterinarian, research scientist, educator, conservationist, and executive-level administrator. And then we will hear from Mr. Jim Matty, who is president and CEO of the Association of Zoos and Aquariums. He previously served 9 years as the president of the National Park Foundation, president of the League of Conservation Voters, and was the first executive director of the Western Governors Association. He also currently serves as the chairman of the board of directors for the Center for Clear Air Policy. As president and CEO of the AZA, Mr. Matty has raised a positive profile of the AZA-accredited zoos and aquariums as drivers of tourism and economic development, as leaders in animal care and welfare, and as key players in the conservation of wildlife and wild places. So we do have all of your written testimony, and again, we appreciate you all attending today, and we'll start with Mr. Kelly.
Madam Chair, Ranking Member Brady, and members of the committee, thank you so much for this opportunity to talk about the zoo, about the Conservation Biology Institute, and to talk about our stewardship of an important living collection of animals and our vital research and conservation efforts. Simply put, our job, our mission, our role is to save species. However, our number one priority, day in, day out, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, is the welfare of the animals in our collection and human safety. We use 5 distinct oversight processes to ensure great animal care and safety, including a robust Institutional Animal Care and Use Committee, annual inspections and guidance from the USDA Animal Plant Health Inspection Service, advice and inspections from OSHA, an annual Smithsonian Safety and Health Inspection, and as you'll hear from Mr. Matty, accreditation by the Association of Zoos and Aquariums. Now, last December, we had several public reports about animal welfare issues at the National Zoo. The issue actually began last summer when a volunteer notified me about her concerns about animal welfare decisions at the Cheetah Conservation Station Department. I immediately directed our Animal Care and Use Committee to investigate. The IACUC, as we call it, concluded last fall that some of the volunteers' concerns had merit, and they made 25 observations and recommendations. I agreed with 24 of those observations and recommendations, and it's important to note that the animal care team had already addressed or were in the process of implementing appropriate changes. There were no egregious surprises. Now, it was my judgment that some of the problems in Cheetah Conservation Station resulted from staffing imbalances that temporarily stressed our system. So in late 2013, I initiated a 3-part program I called Speed Up, Slow Down, and Rebalance. And that program has provided relief to animal care staff. Human resources staff, at my direction, has given high priority to filling vacant animal keeper, biologist, curator, veterinary, and nutrition positions, and already 7 new animal care hires or promotions have been completed, and 10 more recruitments are in process. So I assure you that we provide great care for our animals and we operate safely. As part of the Smithsonian, the Zoo and the Conservation Biology Institute do rely on federal appropriations for the majority of our funding needs. However, in order to realize our mission, to operate a safe environment, and to maintain our role as a leader in animal care, we must and will grow alternative funding sources. Since my appointment 4 years ago, we focused on raising more resources from private research grants and government research grants and contracts to fund our research and conservation. We focused on philanthropy from private and corporate donors. And we've generated income from sales of food and merchandise and stuffed panda bears and even a new carousel. So I'm pleased to report that all these sources of revenue have grown over the last 4 years. And while these sources can supplement our federal appropriation, they cannot replace it. And as Secretary Clough and the Regents often remind me, my job is to raise more revenue from these alternative sources in the future. The National Zoo and the Smithsonian Conservation Biology Institute play a crucial role in one of the Smithsonian's 4 grand challenges, and that is understanding and sustaining a biodiverse planet. We're guiding this mission by 3 leadership strategies. Number 1, we're saving species through science. Number 2, we're training the next generation of conservation biologists. And number 3, we're providing a world-class educational experience and a great visitor experience right here in Washington, D.C. In just a moment, Dr. Monfort is going to speak about the first 2 of those strategies. But I'm going to conclude my testimony with a few words about our plans for a great public experience here at the zoo in Washington. Did you know that the National Zoo is the favorite destination in Washington for families with children? You know, I never want to give up this hard-won leadership position, because we can use this position to deliver an effective, efficient, informal and formal education message for learners of all ages. We coordinate this conservation message with K through 12 STEM curriculum. And to stay relevant and efficient, we're using both federal and private funding to modernize our exhibits and our animal care infrastructure. During the last 10 years, we've invested more than $250 million in our beloved institution. Now, that sounds like a lot of money, and it is. But we're 125 years old, as Madam Chair said, and we still have a ways to go to upgrade these important facilities. And we're using federal and private sources and technology to expand our reach around the country and around the world. Unique assets like PandaCam, sponsored by Ford Motor Company Fund, engage and delight millions of virtual visitors around the globe, while at the same time educating and inspiring global audiences about conservation and saving species. The zoo's highest priority is and always will be the welfare of our animals in our care and the safety of our visitors and staff. So I'm excited and grateful for our federal support for collection stewardship, scientific research, and conservation, professional training, and a great family experience. Mr. Vargas, I'll be happy to address your question in the Q&A if that's appropriate. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. We now turn to Dr. Monfort.
Madam Chair, distinguished members, thank you so much for the opportunity today to appear before the committee to testify about our efforts to save species through science and to train the next generation of conservation professionals. You may not know that in the late 1960s, the National Zoo established one of the world's very first standalone zoo-based research departments, and we co-founded an entirely new discipline of science known as zoo biology, a discipline that was specifically aimed at using science to improve animal management, reproduction, and welfare. Today, in fact, science-based management is considered the gold standard of practice for all modern zoos, and that transformation of the zoo profession can be traced directly to the lineage of National Zoo scientists and the generation of colleagues that they mentored and placed in positions worldwide. Additionally, in the early 1980s, our scientists helped usher in another new discipline of science called conservation biology. And this is a discipline that's based on the premise that biological diversity and the functioning of ecosystems are of benefit to current and future human societies. Before the first textbooks in this discipline were even published in the late 1980s, the National Zoo and its scientists had already begun reintroducing golden lion tamarins back into the Atlantic coastal rainforest of Brazil. And today, this remains as one of the greatest success stories in modern zoo and conservation history, joined by other programs that were led or assisted by National Zoo scientists, including programs like the black-footed ferret, the California condor, the Florida panther, and others. Today, roughly 20% of the world's accredited zoos in Europe and America have dedicated research departments, but only a very small number of those actually employ full-time PhD-level scientists and conservationists. Through our generous federal appropriations, we employ 33 federal PhD-level scientists and veterinarians, and by effectively leveraging our federal appropriations with grants and philanthropy, we're able to support an additional 14 non-federal scientists, 25 postdoctoral fellows, and 70 graduate students. All told, the National Zoo has more than 200 scientific personnel involved in understanding and sustaining a biodiverse planet, working with partners in more than 25 countries worldwide. Saving species is hard work, and it requires fundamental knowledge about the complexity and diversity of species biology. And the truth is that knowledge is sorely lacking for hundreds of species that already are reliant upon human care in zoos. The time to save a species is not when they're down to their last couple of dozen animals, which was the case for species like the Przewalski's horse, the black-footed ferret, and California condor. Conservation success really requires a combination of things: trained scientists, access to animals, funding, of course, and appropriate facilities designed specifically to study and manage wildlife species before they become threatened. At the Smithsonian's National Zoo and Conservation Biology Institute, we're creating a whole host of new alliances. We're pursuing progressive animal management strategies and investing in conservation science to achieve significant and expanded conservation outcomes. Our science ranges from saving species in human care, but also includes conserving key wildlife habitats, to understanding animal migration patterns, and even identifying disease pandemics that threaten both humans and wildlife alike. Our scientists have made many important discoveries, including the identification of the elephant herpes virus, which is known to cause up to 1/3 of juvenile elephant mortality around the world, the chytrid fungus, which is potentially responsible for up to 1/3 of amphibian species becoming extinct across the planet, and we possess the world's foremost wildlife reproduction laboratories that have done things like helped us produce baobab, of course, but other species like elephants and even sea corals. The saving species also requires the commitment of well-trained professionals, and over the past 40 years, the National Zoo has pioneered training of more than 6,000 trainees worldwide, many of whom have gone on to become leaders in the conservation field in more than 30 countries worldwide. Now, in partnership with George Mason University, we're very proud of our Smithsonian Mason School of Conservation, which is located on our 3,200-acre campus in Front Royal, Virginia. And this program builds on our legacy and reflects our philosophy that the best way to prepare for an uncertain future is to foster a new, a better equipped, and highly motivated generation of conservation professionals that will work to conserve the living natural resources that we all need to survive ourselves. This is the core principle of the discipline of conservation biology and the role that is emerging within zoos worldwide. And we believe that it's the achievements of our trainees that will provide the best hope for long-term success in achieving our mission of understanding and sustaining biodiversity for the benefit of all of us. Thank you very much for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you very much. And we now turn to Mr. Maddie for his testimony.
Thank you, Chairwoman Miller and Ranking Member Brady for the opportunity to testify before the committee today about the AZA accreditation process. AZA's 224 accredited zoos and aquariums annually see more than 182 million visitors. Collectively, they generate more than $21 billion in annual economic activity and support more than 204,000 jobs across the country. Let me just pause and say that when I look up at the dais, I see elected officials, I see members of Congress and members of the committee, but I also see the Georgia Aquarium, the Detroit Zoo, and the Philadelphia Zoo, and the Happy Hollow Zoo, and San Diego. So it's a pleasure to be here and have the opportunity to speak about the National Zoo. Over the last 5 years, AZA-accredited institutions supported more than 1,000 field conservation and research projects that cost us about $160 million annually, and we're operating, our members are operating those programs in over 100 countries. In the last 10 years, these accredited zoos and aquariums formally trained more than 400,000 school teachers, supporting science curricula with effective teaching material and hands-on experience. School field trips and programs annually connect more than 15 million students with the natural world. This is very important, as a recent National Research Council study found that people learn as much as 95% of their science in informal settings, such as AZA-accredited zoos and aquariums. At the heart of the AZA mission is the accreditation process that we're here to talk about and focus on today, which ensures that only those zoos and aquariums that meet the highest standards can become members of AZA. In the past 40 years, hundreds of inspectors have devoted more than 200,000 hours to the accreditation process. The AZA accreditation process is rigorous, unbiased. It's a lengthy evaluation involving self-evaluation, on-site inspection, and peer review, and it really has stood the test of time. The standards are continuously evolving, getting stronger as we learn more about the needs of the animals in our care. Accreditation helps to develop public confidence through a thorough, measured, and documented audit that establishes whether an institution meets or exceeds current professional standards as established by the association. This is accomplished by a periodic comprehensive review and site inspection conducted by zoological experts in operations, animal management, and veterinary medicine. Once granted, AZA accreditation is a publicly recognized badge signifying excellence in and commitment to animal management and welfare, veterinary care, ethics, physical facilities, staffing, conservation, education, safety and security, finance, and support organizations. Conversely, denial of accreditation should lead to improvements in identified areas and a concurrent increase in cooperation and support from governing bodies and other organizations. Each institution that goes through accreditation does so with the understanding that the process is confidential. In keeping with that standard operating procedure, I want to briefly describe how the overall AZA accreditation process works. First, we carefully select the accreditation commission members who have the expertise to evaluate each zoo and aquarium. These are experts and leaders in their field, have been for many years. They're educated and experienced in zoo and aquarium operations, animal management, and veterinary medicine. There are 12 experts on the Accreditation Commission. The commission evaluates every zoo and aquarium to make sure it meets the highest standards for animal management and care, including living environments, social groupings, health, and nutrition. The commission also ensures that animals are provided with enrichment, which stimulate each animal's natural behavior and provide variety in their daily routines. We evaluate veterinary programs, their involvement in conservation research, education programs, their safety policies and procedures. Because a zoo or aquarium needs a strong foundation in order to continue to meet those high standards, we also look at the finances, we look at the operation of the governing authority and any support organizations such as the Friends of the Zoo. Every candidate for accreditation fills out a detailed questionnaire. That's a self-evaluation process that comes into a professional staff in my organization, which reviews that and comments on that. After the Accreditation Commission studies that application, a team of inspectors visits the zoo or an aquarium in person. Each team includes at least one veterinarian along with animal and operations experts as well. They produce a written and detailed report. The commission meets twice a year to consider all those candidates for accreditation, and when they meet, the director of the institution appears before the commission to answer questions and resolve issues. They examine the application, the supporting documents submitted by the zoo or aquarium inspection team's report, and any information received from outside individuals and organizations, including U.S. Department of Agriculture and often other federal agencies that have had opportunities to comment on the zoo. The zoo and aquarium senior officials must appear before that accreditation commission. With each zoo and aquarium must keep up with these changes to remain AZA accredited. As I explained to the gentleman at the table and other members of our association, if you just keep doing what you're doing, 5 years later you won't be accredited because the standards are constantly evolving and constantly getting stronger. I want to conclude by saying that the National Zoo is highly respected within the AZA community and among the public for its leadership in scientific research, its commitment to conservation. It is unique among AZA-accredited zoos and aquariums, as the chair mentioned, in that it truly belongs to all Americans by virtue of being a member of the Smithsonian family. I also want to commend Dennis Kelly for his outstanding leadership at the National Zoo. Dennis is a member of the AZA Board of Directors as an expert voice on a range of issues, particularly including conservation and safety. Dr. Montfort also is a member of the association and is a leader in our scientific endeavors in our science committees. Thank you for the opportunity to testify on this important matter. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Appreciate all the witnesses. I think I'll start with Dennis Kelly, Mr. Kelly. And I had the opportunity to visit the zoo with you not too long ago, and it is just a remarkable place. And as we mentioned in the outside, it's unique because the funding comes from the federal government. I'm just wondering, do you think that changes your vision for a zoo? I mean, if you were running a zoo that was not federally financed, how does that change perhaps your master plan and how you do things there at the zoo as well. And a bit two-part question, because and really showing the Bao. It was also, and I'm glad you mentioned in your opening comments about Ford Motor Company, a Michigan company who is very, very engaged. They're sponsoring the Panda exhibit. I know they just recently gave you a new truck in that. And I just mentioned that as one of the many, many corporate citizens and sponsors, donors to the National Zoo, and average everyday citizens as well. And so really, even though you're getting the money from the federal government, the amount of money that you're raising privately is also really quite remarkable, and a tribute, I think, to the leadership that you've exhibited at the zoo. So perhaps you could talk a little bit about the financing part of that.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, for that question. First, I've run other zoos, Zoo Atlanta, in the past. And here, in this role, I feel a particular responsibility to each and every citizen of the United States, every taxpayer. So the work we do is in cognition of it has to be as relevant to the family in Rock Creek or in Cleveland Park, but it also has to be relevant to families in Kansas and Hawaii and California. And so our work is focused on science, it's focused on conservation, it's focused on training the next generation, as well as interpreting it to the visitors who come to Washington and experience the zoo. So every decision we make is in cognition that our owners are every American citizen. In that regard, we reach out to people like Ron Kagan at the Detroit Zoo, and we cooperate with him on his efforts. For example, you mentioned research on gorilla heart disease, and that collaboration is very valuable. We're collaborating with not just zoological colleagues, but colleagues in China, for example, with the direction of the State Department and the Fish and Wildlife Service to actually make sure that there are more pandas like Bao Bao born. Having said that, we are consciously aware that the fact that we should and must leverage federal resources. So collaborations with great partners like Ford Motor Company, like Microsoft, like the Coca-Cola Company, even international companies, potentially like international airlines that want to build a presence but also contribute to our mission, we find that those to be powerful and leveraging. And we think that's a good way to use the taxpayer dollars. So you'll see more of that in the future, leveraging. And my colleagues at San Diego Zoo and Detroit Zoo are using the same strategies, but we think it's a win-win for conservation. At the end of the day, we all want to save species.
You know, you mentioned Microsoft, and that also brought me back to something that you had mentioned, that the zoo is the #1 destination in D.C. for with groups with families, excuse me, families with children. And just because of the webcam, the Panda Cam, that has been such an incredible success. Can you just talk a little bit about how you are utilizing technology to be able to enhance the experience for folks that just, you know, can't afford to come to Washington, D.C., but really, again, a zoo is such a national treasure. How can we get that kind of information out to teachers, teacher resources, or what have you? Perhaps you could expand on that a bit.
Great question. We're actually utilizing federal resources, so we have more critter cams than any other zoological institution in the world, and that's because of our federal support and federal infrastructure. So PandaCam is one. It's interesting that the very first critter cam was actually the naked mole rat, and that's still today our second most, the naked mole rat. The naked mole rat is a fascinating creature that we've been studying
One of
for
my
years.
personal favorites, I know.
And but the naked mole rat camera was the very first one, and but it's interesting because the naked mole rat lives to be about 30 years old, and it's one of the few species in which cancer has never been detected. It lives its life underground. It's a mammal, and yet we've never detected cancer. But that camera is a way to tell that story. So collaborating with people like Microsoft and Discovery Channel and Smithsonian Channel is a way that we're building that awareness of conservation. And if I might, Mr. Maddie is, in AZA has done work with Microsoft in a unique way that, if I may, get him to explain how Microsoft has partnered with accredited zoos.
Sure. Dr. Maddie, or Mr. Maddie.
We're actively involved with Microsoft now, with a family-friendly game called Zoo Tycoon. the original version of that, very popular. Millions and millions of families have purchased that and played that game. It wasn't, the zoo and the game did not meet our accreditation standards, and so it was a lot of fun over the last couple of years to work with Microsoft engineers and others to redesign the game so that all the animal care practices, all the animal welfare practices, the veterinary care, and everything else in this simulation actually simulates the best standards of animal care and welfare as a learning tool. A lot of fun and hopefully a meaningful educational experience for millions of families.
Very good. I'm sort of boring in on these questions because you know, we work here every day, and we see these fantastic facilities that we have here in the nation's capital. And I come from southeast Michigan that was #1 in everything you didn't want to be #1 in during the very painful economic transition. And our kids just can't afford to hardly get on a bus and come to a field trip anymore. And yet, so I'm always interested in how I use it as sort of an example of how, how we are in all of the Smithsonian's really trying to reach out around the country and the world, really, to bring this experience. And with that, and that's why I mentioned, I thought it was worth noting to saying that there's no fee for people to come into the zoo. I think that is such an important thing. And I would ask the next question to Dr. Monfort about Front Royal, because I think you only open it to the public on a very limited basis. I'm not sure how often but I know you're thinking about opening it a bit more. And as you mentioned, all of the PhDs that you have there and all the science and research that is going on there, and I guess this is my question, I'm assuming that one of the reasons it's not open to the public more is because you think that might impact in some way your work, your very important work that you're doing there. So what is your thought going forward on having any more public availability to go there, or again, using electronic access to be able to really open it up as much as you possibly can?
That's a great question. First of all, the facility is very unique in that we're a science-based facility, so the structures that we build are built for functionality, for the ability to do naturalistic breeding. Animals that need herd setups can be in herds or social groupings, or in order to conduct science, we have special facilities that are built just for, say, carnivores or for hoofed animals, for example. So it's, and in many cases, those research projects are being conducted in a way that having a lot of visitation might disturb the research that's going on. Having said that, we do work very hard to try and open our facility when it's possible. One of the ways we've done that is through our new partnerships. So when we did our master plan about 7 or 8 years ago, we created partnership zones, and the idea, the result of that ended up being initially our partnership with George Mason University, and now we have a school there, which attracts quite a number of people that come there for both undergraduate education and professional continuing education, but also for holding special events and things of that nature. We have a new partnership with NEON, which is the National Ecological Observatory Network. And so we're one of only 20 core sites in the United States, part of that program where they're collecting information on the ecology of North America. So that's also attracting a lot of new collaborators and new people. And our master plan does include having a small visitor center there. And then first thing I would say, if you haven't been, please come. We'd love to show it off to you. It's a really fascinating facility. It was a cavalry remount station back in the early 1900s, so it has some really great history. And there are people that want to come in and learn about the history. They want to learn about the programs we're doing. And we think we can do that with some guided tours. We do actually provide guided tours by docents now. And so we're working to open it up, but we want to maintain the core mission, which is science, and make sure that whatever we do to open it up doesn't interfere with that primary mission.
Okay, I'm glad you mentioned about the docents. That's one of the things I found certainly at the zoo, at all of the Smithsonian's, at the Library of Congress or whatever. Before I came to this job, actually, I was the official historian of Michigan, and we had the Historical Center in downtown Lansing. I'm going to tell you, we could never have run that operation, and they can't today without the volunteers and without the docents. It's just remarkable, the passion that these folks feel and how great they get at their jobs, and they do a wonderful job. Just my last question. I know I'm a little over my time here, but to Mr. Maddie, just listening to you go through, as you mentioned, a very lengthy, rather exhaustive accreditation process that your organization has, and Does anyone ever lose their accreditation? Maybe you don't want to mention anyone specifically, but is that, it would seem like that would be an uncommon thing, but yet going through that kind of a, as I say, an exhaustive process that you have, certainly some people probably just, some organizations, facilities just don't make it.
Yes, unfortunately, it is, well, fortunately, it's rigorous, and it's every 5 years. Being accredited isn't forever. It's until the next accreditation, inspection, and review process. But yes, the Accreditation Commission meets every 6 months, roughly. They hear, on average, 25 cases each time they meet. That's roughly 50 a year, and typically in a year there will be institutions whose accreditation is suspended for a year. We call that tabling because there are outstanding concerns that have not been fully addressed. And from time to time, institutions are not, even with a year's grace, are not able to overcome those concerns, and they do lose their accreditation.
Thank you very much. Recognize the ranking member, Mr. Brady.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. First of all, for full disclosure, I always wanted to be a director of the zoo. But Philadelphia. But I would be doing a little bit differently. I would have my khaki uniform with my short pants and the crop, the camouflage Jeep, and I have an animal with me everywhere I go. I don't know whether it be that naked rat or what. But a cub or whatever, because every time I see, like our director of the zoo, or well, not necessarily him, but a lot of the people that work with the zoo, they always have a cub or something. That's a great promo. I mean, nothing better than that than the show and tell. And when the only time I leave my office to vote or go to my hearings of this committee or other committees is when the zoo day. And I go over there, and the last time I saw the little chimpanzee, and they had the lion club, the lion cub. I mean, that's a great promo. You ought to think about that, or maybe you need an assistant, you know, at the end of my life here. It seems the only uniform you guys have is beards, which is fine. I could grow a beard. But I just got a couple little questions. We had that terrible problem with the deaths of the animals, and somebody had mentioned early on that it might have been budgetary. But I also hear it wasn't budgetary. They wanted to blame it on the sequester or whatever. But it was maybe administrative issues. Have we addressed that? I mean, can you tell me, you know?
Yes, sir. We have, like every agency, are responsible for managing our resources as carefully as possible. I made decisions to make sure we stay within our budget and made a number of cuts that didn't impact frontline animal care, and that was as we're raising more money, but we want to be as lean an operation as possible. So I actually, after having arrived 4 years ago, I reduced staff in administration and communications. In various departments, I've never cut frontline staff. Having said that, the budget that we have now provides for us to continue having great animal care and grow our basis. Budget uncertainty is the worst thing in running an institution like ours, and now that we have budget certainty, we can move forward and build upon that basis. I would also add that you know, I'm close to the Philadelphia Zoo. I take great advice from your director, Vic Dewan. I consider him a...
Don't tell him I want to be the director, please. I want to be back.
I'm afraid the secret's out, but Vic is a great example of what we are emulating is to build upon a strong federal base and utilize selling of more stuffed panda bears and carousel rides and plow that back in such that we can support the research mission going forward and actually leverage it.
Mr. Matter, you mentioned something about the Department of Agriculture. They did a test. They gave us a clean bill of health in the zoo prior to those animals. That, you know, the problem we had with the animals that were killed. I mean, did they miss something?
No, I don't think so. The U.S. Department of Agriculture inspects 3,000 facilities that display animals to the public to see. It's not the it meets our standards, it meets the USDA standards, and but there's mortality in the collection every day because it's a living collection.
Thank you. One last question. I have a major peeve with our zoo. We lost our elephants. When you walk into the Philadelphia Zoo, you see a great big sculpture of an elephant, but we don't have any elephants. I have 4 grandchildren. 2 of them saw elephants. The other 2, being younger, won't get a chance in Philadelphia to see my elephants. I'm going to come down and let them see the elephants in your zoo. I would imagine that was a area issue. Or we weren't big enough to have them. I think we sent them out to Arizona. You know, you have about 4 of them now, right?
Yes, sir. We have 4 elephants, and we're actually taking on 3 more that are being transferred to us from the Calgary Zoo, all with private funding. The important thing is every zoo, every well-run accredited zoo needs to make choices and decisions about the animals that they can care for best. At your Smithsonian National Zoo, we made a decision almost a decade ago that we were going to focus on a species that needed help, Asian elephants. So we committed a lot of resources, a lot of taxpayer resources and private resources and land to build a world-class Asian elephant facility. Meanwhile, we decided to not be in the polar bear conservation, in the polar bear business, but Philadelphia Zoo is. And so that's an example of the trade-off that we make. I think Vic Dewan is making, and the board at Philadelphia Zoo are making those tough decisions, but that doesn't preclude elephants from coming back to Philadelphia when the right space and the right time.
Yeah, we're looking to enlarge. You know, I want to bring the 2 grandchildren never saw a live elephant. I want to bring them down here to see them. When I visited your zoo a few years ago, they brought me back to see the elephants, and there was a mother and a daughter and a bull. You can't get near the bull. Nobody get near the male elephant. And they brought us into this room, and we went back there, and they stood us there, and here they came. Well, the first thing I did was look for the exit. They are massive. They're magnificent animals. So I would like to see us get them back. But meanwhile, you get another customer to come to your zoo. Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank the gentleman. And just before we go to Mr. Vargas, we had the same thing at the Detroit Zoo with our elephants. Well, our director made the decision. You know, they were standing on concrete so many hours in the day. They were getting arthritis in their legs and all these different kinds of things. And it was very traumatic for the community when we lost our elephants, but we understood the decision that he made. So it's, as you say, the directors have to make their decisions. The chair recognizes Mr. Vargas from California.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Appreciate it. Come to San Diego. We have them all. We have the elephants. We have the polar bears. We have naked rats and mice. In fact, all our animals are naked. We don't have the naked guy. That guy's in New York. You know, I'm very much in favor of zoos. I've lived in New York, and they have the Bronx Zoo, which is a magnificent zoo also. And I've been to your zoo here, which is magnificent. And of course, we have the best one, the world-famous San Diego Zoo, which really is it's a jewel in San Diego. We love it. It's fantastic. We also have the Wild Animal Park.
Excuse me, Philadelphia has the first zoo.
And a wonderful zoo. But my daughter's, in fact, you have a beautiful picture here that I'm going to make sure I share with her. My daughter's favorite, I have a 10-year-old daughter and a 17-year-old. My 10-year-old loves the giraffes. And we have a picture at home of my wife and I actually feeding the giraffes at the Wild Animal Park. We had a chance to do that a number of years ago. And I thought it was outrageous what the Copenhagen Zoo did. You know, it certainly struck a chord, I think, in everybody's heart around the world that sees these animals as gentle giants. And then how they did it. You know, they dissected it in front of children and then fed it to these lions. And no disrespect to the lions. In fact, some of those lions lost their life in a very inglorious way themselves. I know that the Europeans have a different view of than we do with respect to the purity of lions and animals, and that they didn't want to have inbreeding going on. Of course, there's other ways to do that. There's contraceptives that they can use for the animals. There's ways that they can move them so they don't have to kill the animals. But I have to say, I mean, it just seemed outrageous what they did. Could you comment on that? Because, you know, my daughter was so upset about that, you know, are they going to do that to our, you know, giraffes? And I assured her that they wouldn't do it, and I hope that my assurances are correct. I mean, in San Diego, I got to tell you, I am confident in San Diego we wouldn't do that. We wouldn't do that. The outcry would be absolutely outrageous. So many of us that belong to the Zoological Society there would be absolutely outraged. We wouldn't allow that to happen.
And you're correct. In fact, we have a written policy at your Smithsonian National Zoo. I approve every euthanasia, and we do euthanize animals for their own when they're suffering, just as you would your dog or your cat. It is our written policy, and I would never approve at Smithsonian National Zoo that we would euthanize an animal for population management purposes, as was done at the Copenhagen Zoo. You're exactly correct. In Copenhagen and in that part of Europe, they have a different philosophy about how to manage animals. It's based in science, but it is against our culture to use that same policy. And in fact, at the National Zoo, we do use contraception, we do use social separation as a way to manage that. You mentioned in the early part of the hearing that they could have sent those animals to other zoos. There were other zoos in Europe that offered to take them, and the director chose not to take that option. I can't get in his head. I know him, but I don't know why he didn't take that option.
So that's something that I've never seen it here in the United States. That's something that I imagine wouldn't happen. We also have, for good or ill, we do have also reserves or areas where people take animals. I mean, people unfortunately have wild animals in their homes, and every so often they're discovered and they're taken from them, and they're put in these places where they preserve them. I mean, we wouldn't do this, right? We wouldn't go around trying to figure out how to kill these animals for that reason. Are there any zoos in the United States that would follow the Copenhagen model? Can anyone answer that, Mr.?
Not that I'm aware of.
Not that you're aware of. Okay, I mean, you know, it's interesting because zoos are controversial, as everything is. We had a very wealthy individual in San Diego donate a lot of money to the university there, one of the to set up a school for engineers, and someone criticized him for that. So I know now that whatever you do, it'll be criticized. I mean, this was his philanthropy, and he was criticized for it. So everything is controversial, in my opinion. Now, that being said, you know, zoos, I think, are wonderful places where children learn about animals, to respect them, respect nature. They're willing later on to make sacrifices themselves, to give money, to preserve animals in the wild, also to preserve them, you know, through zoos. I think they're wonderful places, but to have this sort of thing happen, I think sets us all back. And I hope that within your groups, as you speak among your peers, that word would get out to others. That I think was very damaging to zoos around the world. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you all very much for coming. The zoo is a fantastic thing. And, you know, as has been mentioned, and I appreciate the questions, the very insightful questions about sometimes we hear about the death of the animals. And I was just reading an article that appeared here today. The headline is, "Why Are Baby Animals Dying at the National Zoo?" Which is but when you read the article, it's not anywhere as really as what the headline is really saying. Here's one line here: "The National Kingdom is a rough, brutal, and fatal place, even in controlled environments like zoos, and even for species that are cute and cuddly." And I mentioned to you that I had the great opportunity of having Dr. Murray, your chief veterinarian, on my cable show last week, and was talking about the bear sloths, where the mother bear had 8, was it 1 or 2 of the 2? But as she mentioned to me, if this was in nature, all of them would have been gone. So it really is for us, I think, to keep reminding folks of the kind of business that you're in. And sometimes these sensational stories, we have to put them in perspective. But I certainly appreciate your comment about the Copenhagen Zoo. And just one other issue that I thought was sort of, when I came to visit you last, it was just several days after you had recaptured Rusty the red panda, talking about social media. That had to be the biggest social media event going on in Washington, D.C. when Rusty escaped. And so I now know how Rusty got out of his enclosure, because if you go there, there's along the back is all this real high black bamboo, and they theorized that there was a real heavy rain the day he got out, and the black bamboo must have come down a little bit. Man, that thing saw his way out, and he was gone. And they finally picked him up in DuPont Circle or somewhere. He was off. But the amount of hits that you had, somebody said there were 30 million hits about where is Rusty the Red Panda. It was on all the national talk shows. And I just mentioned that in closing because I think that was very vivid demonstration, indicative of how the people of, certainly of Washington, D.C. and our nation's capital and throughout our country feel about our national zoo and our zoos and what a national treasure they are and how important it is. And before I close, I see Mr. Matty waving his finger
Just
there.
very quickly, Madam Chair, thank you, and I'll take you back to the comments of Mr. Brady at the beginning. Zoo Day this year is in late May. We'll be in the Rayburn House Office Building. We'll be downstairs in the courtyard and the cafeteria. I would guess that if last year's any guide, there'll be several thousand of your colleagues and your staff there enjoying a wildlife experience in an unusual way, and we hope that all of you will join us then.
Well, thank you for reminding of us that, certainly. And I know Mr. Brady will be there in his khaki shorts and his outfit and with his whip there, so he'll be ready. But at any rate, we thank you so much. This committee looks forward to continuing to work with the zoo, of course, the entire Smithsonian. So if there are issues that you would like to talk to us about, or other ways that this committee can, as we are exercising our oversight responsibilities, help amplify a very positive message as well. That is part of our jurisdiction and our desire as well. And so without objection, all members will have 5 legislative days to submit to the chair additional written questions for the witnesses, if there are any, so that they can be made part of the record. And with that, the hearing is adjourned. Thank you.